Had any chips recently?
Oh man, talking about Lay's, some Doritos.
Oh, no. I'm talking about these potatoes that are cut up into these long strips. Because yesterday after church, we went to the Codfather.
Okay,
Had some fish and chips.
Man.
Yeah.
You know what? I love, England's great, United Kingdom's great, Canada's great, but man, did they say some things wrong? Because really everything should be based around the Mid-South of like Memphis and Little Rock and Bald Knob.
Coke?
And Coke all day. Exactly. It's Coke all day. That's a big one for that region, right?
Yeah.
It's not soda, not pop.
Yeah.
Coke.
Yeah.
Man. But these other countries, man, it just is like mind-blowing.
Yeah, they do have some weird words. I think, I've read that technology that was kind of invented after the British Empire kind of broke up. That's where you see these English dialects starting to diverge in some of their words. So you got some differences here, like a flashlight.
Oh yeah, they say like a torch.
That's right. Yeah. You line up for something.
Oh, queue.
Yeah, they're queuing up. Yeah,
queuing up, man. Just get in a line. Don't be so fancy about it with your pinky in the air, England.
That's right. Maybe for British, you have a diaper for a little baby.
What? Yeah. What do they call it?
Nappy.
Oh, I don't like that.
A nappy.
Too close to nap. I like naps too much.
Do you ever live in an apartment?
Oh yeah.
Or a flat?
Oh, flat. At my apartments, going to school at MUSC, downtown Charleston. Lived at B Street Flats. Maybe a play on words there.
Yeah. One of the things that we used, there were some German spies who tried to infiltrate American troops, and they were talking about trucks and stuff. Well, they were like all down. They were blending in. Then they called a big heavy truck that you would move stuff with a lorry, and they're like, you're not American if you said lorry. And they
that's
found
like a
out.
shibboleth.
Yeah.
That's like we know you are not one of us. That's great. Here's one in Canada. They don't call it mac and cheese.
Oh,
have you heard this?
No.
I have not heard this. This Canadian thing came up and I was like, what? They call it a craft dinner.
Craft dinner?
Yeah, and they're like it says it on the box, craft dinner, and I'm like, it's mac and cheese.
I think the people of Maine should rise up and fix this. We need to talk to Leanne's people.
The middlemen. Yeah, you can go up there, just tell these people. This one blew my mind. Colored pencils. Do you know what they call colored pencils?
No.
They call them colored crayons.
Colored crayons.
And it's not a crayon.
Colored crayon. All crayons are colored by definition.
It is crazy. One that caused
this is the result of Trudeau being there for too long.
This is what happens, man.
Yeah.
A chicken sandwich.
Chicken burger?
A chicken burger.
Chicken burger.
Because they say it's got a burger bun. Anything with a burger, they're like, it'd be a chicken sandwich if it was like bread.
Flat bread.
But they're like chicken burger. Yeah, so you've heard this one. Yeah.
I have heard it. And, there are some of these words like, slight rabbit trail here.
Okay, yeah, great.
Helicopter.
Okay.
There are words that have come into existence that we then split the roots in the wrong spot. So helio means to go around and around, and pater means wing. So like the bees are in the family or the order class, somewhere there, of Hymenoptera, and it talks about they have a membranous wing, and there's other dioptera means you have two wings. So the pater means wing. So, but we think it really is a heliopater, but we think
helicopter.
But helicopter. So we have copters everywhere, but it's not copter, it's pater. We've took the co off the helico and put it on the pater. Yeah. Same way with burgers. Because it's this town of Hamburg.
Man.
But we took off the ham and we put the burg and the er together. So yeah.
There you go. This one is strange. Smarties, the candy. So do you know what a Smartie is in Canada? It's basically an M&M, which is like it throws out the whole.
They call it an M&M.
They call M&M Smarties.
Oh.
And they call Smarties Rockets. But it's very confusing it would not be that bad if it was like a totally different name, but because it's a name of a different candy, or it just gets too mixed up.
So they buy M&Ms in a bag that are labeled M&Ms, and they call them Smarties.
I'm gonna look this up. I saw this on a video. I didn't see the actual bag. The only thing I can think of, it's either that or it's like an off-brand of M&M is called Smarties.
Okay.
But they don't. But the things are called, I don't know, confused. They call them Rockets. Or the Smarties of the U.S.
This is one thing that English people, British people, I should say, try to get uppity about us with, because we call the fuel that we put in our vehicles gas.
Call it like Petro or something.
And they call it petrol.
Yeah.
And they're like, of course, are you putting a gas into your... No, it's a liquid. Why would you ever call it gas?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But we put in this liquid called gasoline. And the reason gasoline is called gasoline is because it has a very low vapor point where it will go to a gaseous state very easily, which is what makes it so good to explode in your vehicles. Whereas petrol is short for petroleum, which is not what you're putting in your vehicle. So we're both...
Who are you?
Yeah, who are you?
How dare you?
We are both shortening words, we're shortening it from gasoline to gas, from petroleum to petrol. Clearly one of us is wrong, and it's not the Americans.
And it's not the Americans. And as far as Canada goes, I mean, they call their $1 and $2 coins loony and toonies. So I can't trust anything they say. That's all you need to hear right now.
Yeah.
Their money is basically Monopoly money. It's all colorful. It's not even real life. It's like a big joke.
Yeah. Soccer. Should we talk about soccer?
Soccer. It's like football, or is it more fancy? Yeah.
It's just... So, I think we may have covered this ground before. I don't know. We'll cover it again.
Yeah, we will.
Now, because it's a related topic. So there's 3 different types of football.
Okay.
There is rugby football.
Oh, yes.
Association football and gridiron football, a.k.a. American football. And back in the day, maybe late 1800s, early 1900s, you can check the time frame, people at Oxford and what's the other big college over there starts with the C?
Is it Cambridge?
Cambridge. In order to differentiate rugby football and association football, they called it rugger because they just put an E on the end of it.
Okay.
And then they took the SOC out of association
and
called it soccer. Oh. So this nomenclature of soccer originated on the British Isles. Wow. Now you abandoned it. That's fine.
Yeah, but you're to blame.
But you are the cause of this. Yeah, so
wow, and they all up once again uppity.
But I think Australia stands with us. I think Australia is in America. We both call it soccer. So.
Oh man, do you have a good Australian accent in you?
No, I don't think I do. It's like one of those things like you don't want to be put on the spot. I have a well, I don't. It's probably not a passable Irish accent, but I have worked on an Irish accent, because of a character named Mathertos, and he likes to maybe he likes to ride a bike, go around a boat.
Nice,
that's kind of
D&D.
Irish and Canadian. They may be like, no, you're crazy, but I hear some similarities.
Man, well, big takeaway: we say everything right, they say everything wrong. But if you're in the church, you might have some people from all over the place. Yeah,
you got to deal with people in the church. Your church is made up of people.
And honestly, if a visitor says something wrong, call them out on the spot. Right? No, just kidding.
So there's a whole list of these. You can go find them and go have fun with the other English speakers across the pond.
I love it. Well, church number 4, last episode of this series.
Yeah.
And then whatever's next is next. But can you recap the titles? Like they're all alliterated, right?
Yeah. So the church number 1 was talking about the purpose. I always do this like I'm pointing to something. Yeah. There's not going to be anything here other than our nice little backdrop, like we're in a studio. But it's the purpose of the church, which we said was to glorify God through bringing sinners to Christ, saints to Christ likeness. The priority of the church, Acts 2:42.
Okay, yeah.
The programs of the church.
Right.
And now we're going to talk about the people of the church. So purpose, priorities, programs, and people.
I like that. Alliterated. Awesome.
It's biblical if it's alliterated.
That's one of the keys. So let's go ahead and take it to the next level. From the hearts of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take 2 podcast, where we take theology to the next level.
People, are they important to the church, Michael? Because the church is a building, right?
Yeah, I think we probably we have probably all heard that, the church is not the building, it's not a place, it's the people. But you can't have the church building.
That's a good point. That is a very good point.
Yeah, church is made up of people, and it's people that Christ came to redeem. It's the people that we are looking to bring through whom we're looking to glorify God. And ultimately, it's the people that have to be about this purpose and the priorities and the program. So without the people, you kind of don't have those other three things.
Oh, this is a theological underlying question. Depending on how you define church, if some people, if they would say, "Oh, the church is the people of God," that's very broad. Where you'd be like, "When did the church start? Is Abraham is that one of God's people, or no? Or is it a Pentecost thing, or does it go back to Genesis?"
Yeah. The word that we see translated into church, I think it's used even in the Gospels. Some, I think, like Matthew 18 says, bring it before the church.
Yeah.
Which is, people would say, generally I've not heard anyone say Abraham's in the church. Have you heard people that say that?
Well, I think that some people looking for a lot of continuity, like total continuity, would say all of God's people, the church started at Genesis 3, or I don't know. I don't think Baptists typically would say that, but I think there are some who are really looking for, that's where they would say. And I've heard, I need to fact check this, but I've heard arguments like, hey, you looking at the Septuagint, you see ecclesia all the time when it talks about congregation or God's people. I think everyone would say there was something going on at Pentecost. That's difference. But that's always a fun thing to talk about,
Yeah. The two one that I've heard, because I heard growing up that when Jesus called his 12 disciples, the apostles, that was the start of the church. And then because I grew up in a church that was closed communion. So you had to be a member of that local body in order to take communion. And I don't know which came first, this doctrine or the belief of when the church started, but I've heard them say that the only people who took communion on that night on the Lord's Supper were his 12 disciples. It wasn't anyone else. I think that's probably reading. Maybe it was. But I think it's a little bit of a stretch to therefore conclude that. But either when Jesus called the 12 disciples or Pentecost is the two I've heard. Maybe someone might say the church started when Cornelius was.
Oh yeah, go back. Yeah. If you're saying, hey, now we're getting the full.
Yeah, to get the Gentiles in.
Yeah, so you would say if someone's like, oh, is Moses part of God's people? You would not do you can't do the substitution like Moses is not part of the church. Or you would say... I
would say that Moses, I would define the church...
He wasn't, but then he is?
Yeah, I would say the church is the, in Ephesians 2, Paul talks about bringing down the dividing wall, and God made one body out of the Jews and the Gentiles. I would say that's the church.
Okay, so you would say he was not part of the church until chronologically that point in time. And then or is that what you're saying? Like versus like, when he was living on the earth.
I wouldn't say Moses was part of the church.
No. Okay. Yeah.
I would say Moses is part of the Jews.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. And then the Jews and believing Gentiles were brought together into one body. And when that happened, the people that were a part of that were a part of the church.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
I mean, you disagree or?
No. I think most of it's kind of semantics anyway, like where it's like. And what I'm getting at is a lot of on the Presbyterian side of things will be like, well, I think it drives out like dispensationalism where they're like, oh, there's like two separate groups of people, dispensational, or they'll be like, oh, the church is just a parenthesis, that kind of thing. That's kind of that's why people kind of poke at that, I think.
Yeah, I would think that if you are on the extreme of saying the church is a parenthesis because the Jewish people rejected the Messiah, I would disagree with you. I was brought up being told that. If you're on the other side that would say the church was back with Abraham and Moses are part of the church, I'm like, that's also probably not true.
Yeah.
It seems like there was definitely a time when the church came in, but it was God's plan, and it's the uniting of Jews and Gentiles together into one body under a new covenant.
It's not like two separate. It's kind of more like one into two. Like it's like progressing and building versus like
Yeah, I think I just said something that I think I even stand stronger beside. The church comes into existence when the new covenant comes into existence.
Okay,
I think that's
not
how
a
you
Pentecost new covenant, which is, I mean, I think, I think I agree with that too. Yeah,
that's good. All right, so good discussion. If you have differing thoughts, love to hear them. Comment on the video or the podcast, and or ask questions. But according to these notes that we have here. It was formed on Pentecost under the new covenant. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
So when I made these notes, because I extracted this from a paper that I wrote for seminary, so I must have been onto something right. It's a good thing I agree with myself, like 5-6 years later.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's open to Jews and Gentiles. It's Ephesians 2:3, Romans 11, and it's this one body coming together.
We're looking at some passages, some key verses for this topic. 1 Corinthians 12, talks a lot about spiritual gifts, that kind of thing, 12 through 14. 12, verse 12 says, "For just as the body is one and yet has many members," and it kind of goes on talking, bring this analogy. We kind of see that there's unity. We're all in Christ, similar. Paul is saying in Galatians 3:28, there's neither Jew nor Greek. Goes on to say, male or female, slave or free, you're all one in Christ Jesus. And I really like that Galatians 3:28 verse, because it kind of hits best in both worlds, where it prioritizes that unity. You're in Christ. You bring nothing to the table, undercuts any source of pride or anything that you were born with. But you read Paul's letters, and male and female are different. Jew and Greek are different, not erasing that diversity, but there is a priority of things. Because the feminist would say, boom, we're all one in Christ. That's like their verse they latch onto, and they kind of run too hard and ignore all of other Paul's exhortation. But I think it is important to get that balance right, where it's like, man, that unity is very important. Diversity is not unimportant, but that's not the driving factor.
No, a perfect word to describe what you're saying is university. It's unity in diversity. I probably have talked about that before. No need to get on that soapbox, but university is this word that tries to capture, finding the unity in amongst the different diversity. We have verses, in Revelation 5:9. If you've saying, "Is he worthy?" You've saying these things. There's a bunch of allusions to these verses where it talks about people from every tribe, tongue, nation, social classes. Rich and poor, they're all going to be there. Praising God together.
No, I love that a lot. Even in Romans, talking all through weaker brother, stronger brother. It's so interesting that Paul's not like, hey, everybody just adopt this one culture. Or, he's kind of like, there's tension here. Live in that and bear with one another. Good time to talk about local church versus the universal church. I think this gets it can get all sorts of confusing because... What's it mean? Like, why is this? We might not get into this conversation, but why is church membership to your local church more? It's more. It's harder to get into my local church than the. Like, why should we be? All these conversations people have.
Yeah, or people are like, church membership is not biblical. I'm like,
exactly along the lines that, like, I don't need to fill out a packet to get into the big church, the universal church. Why is your church much more important than Jesus's church? Or what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we do see some phenomena in what was going on, right after Pentecost. We know Stephen was part of a synagogue, that people who were being persuaded by Stephen's teaching were being ousted from those synagogues. So those synagogues, while not the church proper, they kind of were the initial seed of what a church looked like. And there was some thought that you could be inside or outside of that synagogue. Fast forward to Paul writing his letter to the Corinthians, his first letter, he talks about, this guy who's boasting, you're boasting about accepting this guy into your fellowship, who I think he was, basically married or sleeping with his mother-in-law or something like his father's wife, maybe a stepmom, some gross immorality. And like, no, you need to cast him out of the church. Discipline, Matthew 18. What does that look like if you don't have a local body who has some definition of who's in and out? 2 Corinthians, Paul's going to come and say, this guy's repented. Bring him back in. Like, forgive him. So all of these letters have this connotation of someone being in and outside this local body. People argue about like, well, was there one church for a whole city?
Oh, yeah.
Probably in Rome there wasn't, because it was too big to have one. Because he talks about
huge. Yeah, that's a
the
good
people
point.
who met at Julia's house and the people that met at this house, because you would have had different local bodies. Well, Julia's house, they could probably have said, whoever, Erasmus or whoever, you're not living right. We're casting you outside of our fellowship. You're not a part of this local body anymore. So I think...
Yeah, you can't just skirt over that.
Yeah.
This is different, but, the other thing that I see it as is like, I know of a bunch of not church organizations, whether it's a Christian school or whether it's like a ministry, but not the church, that are doing things like baptizing people. And it's like, well, maybe the church should baptize people. I feel like
I've not heard of this.
Well, I was actually talking to my sister. She goes to a Southern, like it's funded by the Southern Baptist school, and their Christian school, like people come to faith, let's do a baptism right now,
Wow.
And it's like, you're not the church, you know what I mean? And so that's
because you probably want someone who can come alongside, disciple, do all those, all the things we've talked about before, those programs, and help encapsulate them and teach them in all those different ways. And the school's not necessarily equipped to do that.
Exactly right. Have some sort of accountability. And it's like, baptism specifically, I feel like is so connected with church membership, or like, because you're connecting it with those people. I think an interesting one, maybe we don't have time to talk about it right now, but is, we think of something like the Lord's Supper. Is that something like anyone can do all the time? Hey, let's have like a little Lord's Supper here. Is that an ordinance of the church?
Yeah.
Like, can I go on a mission trip with some buddies and we're having like our little Lord's Supper, and that's okay. If an elder's there, it's okay, but not, it's not okay. And that's just a bigger question. Is that a church thing, or it's like all Christians do that willy-nilly?
Yeah. Well, my solution in the past to my kids who wanted to participate, I'd be like, I'll get you some grape juice and crackers. But I didn't consider that, Lord's Supper. But maybe if anyone can do it anywhere.
Well, because that's the other thing. I think you see it sometimes at parachurch things. Like you might go to a conference and they're like, hey, let's do the Lord's Supper right here. I'm not saying that's bad, but that's not a church administering it. It probably depends. Do you think the church is in charge of baptism and Lord's Supper, or it's like, I'm the church, so I can do it wherever I go? Can I go with some buddies and dunk you and say you're baptized?
These are new questions to me.
Yeah.
I have never known of a parachurch organization administering baptism or communion. But to me, my gut reaction is those are ministers of the church.
That's my gut reaction. I went to this adoption conference, and it's like at the end, they're like, hey, and a pastor was leading it, but not the pastor of this church. So, I mean, I don't want to make too much about it.
Right.
Like, it's not like someone unqualified was doing that, but it just... things to think about. And I think it's more of I don't know of this happening, but you hear stories too of like... This
was the recent adoption thing you went to? Yeah. Do you think that sin led you to the sin of interviewing without your other podcast host there?
Sin affects others, yeah. Or I don't know, you get a bunch of people, a bunch of buddies over at your house, and you're just like, hey, let's jump in the pool and do a quick baptism. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you hear... I don't think these things are like super common, but they're like things that I think devalues the local church. But where they go is like, hey, Great Commission, baby. Like, you know what I'm saying? Is like, they're like, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to be discipling and baptizing, even though I know, really, that's more by implication versus I'm who Jesus was directly. But anyway, just questions to consider.
We do see apostles like spontaneously baptizing people.
That's true.
But we're not apostles. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah.
So the whole infrastructure was a little bit different. And it's just, these are things that, you can think about and see. Not that you have to spend your days thinking about these specific issues, but interesting.
That's good. Good thoughts. Good questions. All right. So we do see that Paul planted local churches with leaders, with structure, with some community life. You can look at Titus 1:5, Acts 20:17, when he's meeting with the elders from Ephesus. He gives Titus and Timothy instructions for how to appoint leaders for churches. So there are ideas. I don't know how you could negate the local church, because it's like, how do you put into practice all that the Bible talks about if you don't have a local body that's practicing that? It's like...
that's like the same thing. That's like the vehicle to the destination. There's got to be some institution that's holding the keys to the kingdom and admitting and, church discipline and all of these things. And I think it does fly in the face of everyone who's like, I'm watching services online. Like, you're just like, I'm a Christian. And you're like, not really plugged in. It's like, these are the kind of things. This is why it's important.
Yeah, that's good. All right. There are positions. We just talked about Paul planting local churches and establishing leaders. There are positions of authority that we see in the church. Ephesians 2:19 through 20 says, and my screen just flipped from dark to light, so let me find it. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and are of God's household. So talking about the church, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ being the cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together is growing into the holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of God in the Spirit. So this imagery of this foundation of this building, cornerstone is what all the foundation is, built off. It's what it gets its back and forth from. And then the rest of the foundation, the prophets from the Old Testament and the apostles from the New Testament, and then us as believers being built into this same organization.
But if there's a crack in the foundation, can I be an apostle and fix that and do all those fun apostle things? I like this verse 4 because I think by implication, foundation set, you don't need, you don't go back, you're building up,
Yeah. And there are some people in the Bible who are referred to as apostles. And I think a good hermeneutics would distinguish between what I would call a capital A apostle and a lowercase a apostle. Because Paul, you read the opening of Galatians, I think he's trying to make this difference between what I would call a capital A apostle and a lowercase apostle. Because he's like, I'm an apostle, not established by man or even through man, but through Jesus himself. I'm a different type of apostle, because apostle just meant someone who's sent out, a messenger from someone else, almost like carries the same idea as an ambassador, someone who's representing someone else. And so, you could be my apostle if I paid you to go do something and you did business in my name or something, but that wouldn't make you a capital A apostle. Man. And so you have some people who get the word apostle added to their names because they're sent out from Paul or something to someone, but they're not on the same caliber as these foundational apostles.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. What we do see biblical setup is elders and deacons as part of local church governance. 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1 extensively talks about elders and deacons, maybe deaconesses. That's how do you interpret, is this deacons' wives or deaconesses?
Yeah. Is that a question?
Yeah, I was saying people feel different ways about it.
Well, there is. And this is another thing similar to apostles. The thing is, we're taking a word from Greek, we're elevating it to a title or a position. But when Jesus had just got done fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, the angels came and deaconed him, because this is a verb; it just means to minister. And so, if you're feeding someone food and you're serving that person, you are deaconing that person, right?
It's the class. It's like Lydia or whoever. It's like she's serving. Are we trying to make this like a official ordained office, or is it just the word?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. And so I think what you see when Paul gives, we kind of see, I don't think they're called deacons, but we kind of see a picture of the deacons when the seven
Acts 6 it's like a proto deacon.
Yeah, the proto deacon, and they're kind of filling that role.
Yeah,
and then by the time Paul's writing, they have these established roles of kind of what we see deacons are the leaders over the non-spiritual things, like the physical things, like the food and maybe the money, the infrastructure, so that you can have leaders over the spiritual things.
Yeah, I think that's good too, and a lot of it is defining terms, because I think. You go to some church very conservative, like John MacArthur's church. I heard him teach one time on elders and deacons. He was like, raise your hand if you're a deacon or deaconess. And he was like, there's like 200 hands in here or whatever. He's like, and the way they view, at least deaconesses, maybe deacons too, is it's not an ordained office. It's like, hey, you're going to serve a ministry, you're a deacon, and anyone can be a deacon for a season or whatever, versus our church is a little more formal. And I think, you've got different, spectrum along those lines.
Yeah, and by those definitions, like you could definitely see people like Anita Marshall.
Right, exactly.
Could be a deaconess.
Running with nursery or what.
Right,
yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yep. All right. So those people. So we have our leaders, elders, and deacons. The apostles in Christ. Those are set, and then you have some people underneath them. And all of those people, if they are truly in the church, have some type of spiritual gift. We did 2 whole series.
That's right.
2 whole lessons on spiritual gifts. So we're not looking to recreate that.
I like that. I don't know if this was you or supernatural presence is like spiritual gifts. That's like analogous. That's pretty cool.
No, yes.
I like that.
So just a little plug for my mother-in-law.
Okay.
She has this book called In His Presence, like spelled like gifts, in his gifts. Yeah. And she goes through like a whole bunch of other P words like personality.
Oh, very cool.
Presence and, some others. And so I borrowed some of this
nice. That's pretty
from
cool.
her. So yeah. So this is her wording on that supernatural presence for the church. Yep.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we've talked at length. Going back to 1 Corinthians 12, go-to passage. To each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for common good. You're trying to build up others in Christ. Ephesians 4 says, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service. That, part of elders' roles is to equip the saints so that they can build up, and use these spiritual gifts to help edify.
Yep. All of us receive at least one. Bible hints that sometimes you can have more than one gift, and they're different. Some are teaching, some are serving, giving, mercy, leadership, encouragement, and they all have these different roles. And there seems to be some distinction between supernatural gifts and natural talents, but most of the time they kind of go hand in hand. Like,
it's probably unusual to be like, I love speaking. It's amazing, but I don't like speaking about the Bible.
Right. Yeah.
Like maybe it's like I don't know.
No, that's good. Purpose of the gifts, we perfect the saints. So through using our gifts, the use of gifts, we can kind of achieve some sanctification, building up of the body. So we see edification there, and ultimately glorifying Christ and God the Father through, see people seeing, oh, wow, this is, I saw God working this way.
Yeah, and I think everyone's got a story of that where everyone's got something that the church needs or is lacking. You might be sitting and be like, man, this church is missing this. That might be why you're there.
Yeah, if you see the need, then you may have the gifting to help fulfill it. Not always. Sometimes you might see a need, and you need someone with the leadership gift to take that,
make it happen,
and make it happen. But if you see the need, maybe you can be a part of that ministry.
That's a good point, because the alternative is you're like, oh, church is lacking this area. You don't do anything, and then I like the notes here says when believers don't use their gifts, the church limps, and you don't want to be knowing something and just idly standing by. Because on the other side of things, when the gifts are being used, that's when a church flourishes. It grows strong, healthy, and things really, really fire at all cylinders.
Lastly, before we close up, the church is a living body. That's the analogy that's used a lot in our New Testament. Christ is the head of our church, making the decisions, the leader. We are the body, joined, supplied, and growing. So we're joined together, supplied by the Holy Spirit, growing. No gift, no person is useless or unimportant. So you have a role there. And when we all do our part, the church is a visible display of Christ to the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like we can so easily just not. We can say, my gift's useless, whatever. That's not the case at all. Is this is a quote from the book, or no? Or is it just in there? I didn't want to over.
No, yeah. This is probably a quote from my paper that I wrote.
Paper. I quoted the great Michael Mott.
Yeah.
God didn't just save you; He placed you in His body for His glory, which is good. It's not. It's like goes to. It's not just like, hey, I pray a prayer, I'm done with life. It's like there's purpose, there's growth, there's sanctification. It's like, man, there is a reason for your giftings and where you're placed. So don't minimize that.
Yeah. And we often talk, we're on the coast.
On the coast.
If you look at Charleston Bible Church's logo, it's very unique. I don't think any church has gone this direction, but it's a lighthouse.
Yeah. Never heard of that.
It's pretty unique.
Hope,
If you know of any other church lighthouse, let me know. No, obviously I'm joking. It's pretty common, especially for coastal churches, to have this lighthouse. But we talk about wanting to reflect. If you ever seen a lighthouse, it has this light and these mirrors and lenses. and they reflect this light that is not, and the lighthouse proper, it is their light. But, if you think of the church, we're reflecting the light of Christ. And I always try to think, that we want to do that, some alliteration again, 3 F's, faithfully.
Okay.
So we're never turning that light off. We're always on. Fervently.
Okay.
So that light is bright, that we are showing all of the glory of Christ to a fallen world. And fully, like there's no part that we're leaving out. And that really takes all of these different gifts working together to do that faithfully, fully, and fervently.
Man, I like that a lot. So we think about the church and people. The church is made up of people. That's what the church is. You need people to be godly leaders in the church. And then really for the church to function, it needs to be equipped by the Spirit through these different giftings that everyone really should be contributing. Excellent.
So just recap, we kind of started out with this. Purpose, glorify God through evangelism, edification. Priorities we get from Acts 2:42, word, fellowship, worship, and prayer. You have to have something to make those practical. Call those programs.
And I like this flexible. That's good too. It's going to be practical. Have some give to it.
Yeah. And then people are the ones who are going to empower those things equipped by Christ.
Great. So reflect on your role in the church. Are you filling that role how you should? Are you functioning as God intended? And maybe you're looking at your church, you're like, hey, our church is not, this is not how my church looks. Maybe you should reevaluate, consider, maybe tap your pastor on the shoulder and say, hey, listen to take 2.
Share that out. Yeah. And no church is perfect.
That's right. Yeah. You've heard the phrase, if you find a perfect church, don't join it because you're going to mess it up.
Yeah. So, but these should generally be what your church is about. And some churches are going to be really good in some areas and they're going to have the weak points in other areas. And then, other churches are going to have a different personality and maybe they have strong strengths where another church has weaknesses. So,
I love it. That's our series on the church. 4 and wrapping it up. What's next?
So next Thursday, it's pre-recorded for us.
Nice.
But we're going to be talking about the moral argument.
Oh yeah, we already recorded it.
Yeah, we already recorded it, so it's already in the can. So next Thursday, you will be kind of continuing on every month or so. Okay. We'll kind of maybe have a philosophy apologetics heavy episode in there. So we're looking at the moral argument, and it doesn't matter whether you're a classical apologist or you're a presuppositional apologist. The moral argument follows the transcendental argument form that the presup folks like. So.
I love it because I was worried about our presuppositional listeners being like, should I listen to this one? You heard it here. Listen to it. I really like our philosophy ones. They're good. I learn lots in them. Any last words, Michael?
No.
Awesome. Well, that's our take. Thanks for listening to Take 2. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.